I think you feel when you have something so life-threatening and serious that it's somehow not caring to laugh. It's so inappropriate. But indeed, instead it's the opposite. That is that pressure release.
How can you laugh? Life is serious. What are you talking about? It's nothing funny.
When I was 38 years old, I felt a lump under my armpit and knew that was a bad thing.
Life is difficult, not unfair.
And went to the doctor, and the first thing the doctor said was, well, I think that might be an infected sweat gland. And what my husband said was, wow, that's weird, you never work out. I don't know how that happened.
Solzhenitsyn, in his book Cancer Ward, see, he doesn't talk about a miracle or a spontaneous remission. He talked about, having had cancer, self-induced healing.
Years ago, my lovely wife decided to leave me, and then I found out I had breast cancer. So July 9th, I had a mastectomy, and July 2nd, I got a divorce. So I like to think that I got rid of 3 boobs in 2 weeks.
So I had to figure out how to tell my sons, who were then 8 and 6 years old, what was going on. And we had been out of town, and while I was out of town, someone had stolen the radio out of my car, and the boys were just crazy about that. They couldn't believe somebody would do that.
Yeah.
So they were talking about that, and I said, well, you guys, I know you think that's crazy, but I have these bad cells in my breast, and they're going to have to take it off. And Adam said, Mom, that's amazing. First they take your radio, then they take your breast.
If you grow up with parents who give you models to live by, and are comedians, who aren't afraid to laugh, you end up very different.
So then Seth said, well, what do they do with all the breasts that they take off? So I said they put them in a room for men to come look at, of course.
Because you then have mottos to live by. They teach you survival behavior.
Dad was always funny and very clever. He had a gift with words. And I can remember one day I was over at the courthouse and I was waiting for him to come off the bench to go to lunch. And so I was just sitting there. And while he was still holding his hearing, he said, and let the record reflect that daughter number 3 is waiting in the wings for me so we can go to lunch. That's just how he always was.
We had an MRI, okay? Found all the cancer everywhere.
He realized that he had cancer in every part of his body, especially the liver, and we all know how serious that is, and bone, every place except for one, his lungs. And he says to my mom,
he gave me this big smile and he said, well, I'm sure glad I didn't quit smoking.
And he smoked like a chimney until he couldn't hold a cigarette. And even after that, this was one of the funniest things. We'd go in there and he'd be in bed and he'd be pretending. And he'd say, Ann, there's nothing there. Give me a match. And I'd say, okay. So I'm pantomiming, right? And he's going, and he is smoking. He is pretending and enjoying a smoke even though there was nothing in his hand up until he was falling asleep.
We were going to bed the night before I had my mastectomy, and I didn't know if they were going to remove 1 breast or 2 breasts, and so I'm crying and I'm lying with him, and I look at him and I say, are you going to love me if they cut this breast off or if they cut off both breasts? And he looks right at me and he goes, they can cut that off and they can cut that off, but they better not cut that off, and pointed.
Yeah. He sure made it funny. We were embarrassed because we were laughing all the time.
Really?
A little bit.
You were embarrassed because you were laughing while he had cancer?
We were embarrassed because we knew he was going to die and he was making us laugh all the time.
And it was fine because I suppose at some point you could say, that's not funny.
Yeah.
I don't appreciate that. But the timing was perfect.
Yeah.
It did make me laugh.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was saying, I'm going to be there for you, and it's not going to matter.
Dad would say something, we'd go out in the living room, we'd all just be doubled over and crying, we were laughing so hard, and the doorbell would ring, and there would be some real sad couple, friend of ours with food, and they're, real sad coming in, and we're in the living room. We can't even talk to go to the door, and we would say, I don't want to go, do you want to go?
It's a weird balance, because it's serious and you can die, So you don't want to play that down. So if somebody says to you, I have cancer, you don't want to go, that's no big deal, you can just laugh about it.
Of course.
Because that's not really true.
That's not
But
true.
you can survive or at least make it through the hard times by making fun of it.
We weren't playing the role of the, how many days are left, because we didn't feel that way because he didn't let us feel that way.
You beat it. You've been
Right.
cancer-free for over 20 years.
Right.
And you got a new set.
And I got a new, yes, in 2000 I got a new set.
You got a new
That's,
set.
Yeah.
And,
yes.
and more jokes, more kidding around about that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But the hard part was staying up all night because we never knew what he was going to do. He wasn't supposed to get out of bed. And so it's 5 minutes to 5, and I cannot stay awake. I mean, I'm just wiped. So I fall asleep, and I wake up 3 minutes later, and he's gone out of the bed. And he's not supposed to be walking. He's got bone cancer everywhere. And I go out in the hall, and he's on all fours in the hall, halfway between the bedroom and the bathroom. I said, Dad, is there anything I can do for you? And he goes, yeah, you know what I need? I need 4 casters. Then you could just roll me down the hall to the bathroom.
She came home on a Friday night and said, I've been to the doctor and I have Hodgkin's.
And the first thing he said to me was, oh my goodness, I knew a guy in high school, a kid in high school, and he died of Hodgkin's.
And his generosity, because he wasn't thinking about himself, and he wanted us to feel good. So he goes, let's all go out to dinner. And Mom says, well, that might be kind of hard, being as he can't even move.
That was on Friday. And by that Monday, we were headed to the doctors in Minneapolis. And we laughed the whole time. And if we hadn't, I don't know what would have happened.
She said, but honey, it's going to be kind of hard to go somewhere. And she goes, what can we do? And he said, let's just go mess up our own kitchen. So we get him in the kitchen, and we're all there except for one, my sister Colleen, who lives in Dallas, and she'd just gone back. And he calls her. He says, I need to call Colleen. He gets her on the phone, and he said, Colleen, I have some good news and bad news. The good news is I'm about to take a great trip, and it's going to be wonderful, and I'm really looking forward to it. But the bad news is I'm the only one who has a ticket.
She has breast cancer, probably caused from the radiation in '83. We don't know that. We don't care. The difference between before and after is before I'd always go, and now I go, you know, and one of those things. Terrible, terrible.
I just remember standing there, and he took his last breath. And then the hospice lady came in. She goes, you don't want to be here when they take him out.
That was in '05, and then, I don't know, maybe 3 months ago, 6 months ago, I was diagnosed with skin cancer, and I can't think of a better couple to have it happen to than her and I. And we're going to get this one too.
We went into what we called the music room, and my sisters got out all this music because Dad loved singing, and we harmonized, and we got out all his favorite songs, and we just burst into song, loud song.
Even the funeral wasn't sad. It just wasn't sad.
We were laughing, we were singing, we were drinking our Baileys, and the paramedic was running late. It was midnight, and he had to call home, and his wife accused him of being in a bar instead of at work because of the background noise. And he came into us and said, you won't believe, somebody's going to have to say, I am working at the Mahoney's. I'm at work. I am not in a bar.
Well, you know, this kid comes to see me, this strange little guy. His parents inflict me upon him to help him deal with the cancer that he has.
So I was sitting there in brain tumor clinic, and I had this idea that we need to play a trick on my radiologist.
He actually changed the way I practice medicine.
Sometimes you're in these brain tumor clinics for about 3 hours waiting for different doctors to go in and out. One doctor comes in, and I put on this pig nose, and I say, you tell Dr. Young that he needs to explain some things to me. And so then we have another doctor come in, And I say, you tell Dr. Young he needs to explain some things to me. He walks in, and he walks in from this direction, and I'm in this direction, and I've got the pig nose on, and I don't think he can see the string because I've got a bit of hair by now. And I say, Dr. Young, I don't think you've completely told me all the side effects of radiation. And so
When he told me that, in that moment, something shifted into place inside me, and I knew Graham was giving me a life lesson.
When my youngest child, Emily, was born, and she was anticipated, we thought everything was good.
you can have fun in even the most tense situations.
A few hours after her birth, and we were told there was a problem, and that problem just continued to get worse and worse until about 8 o'clock that night. The doctor let us know that she had indeed died. That for me was the unthinkable. It was something that I said, I can't do this. I can't give up a child. I can do almost anything but that. But I knew that I had to somehow survive this. But at the moment, I think your thoughts are, I don't want to feel anything. It hurts too much. In fact, I remember writing in my diary that I didn't know you could have this kind of pain and survive it.
Many times the humor comes in a tough time in retrospect of the situation. It doesn't happen right at that moment.
On the first anniversary, I was feeling probably pretty low, and it was snowing outside as it has been the day she was born. So that made it even heavier for me. And then the knock came on the door just before lunch.
But thinking back and laughing about it is what makes it a pleasant memory instead of a haunting one.
I looked, and there was my neighbor, Jane. And I looked down, and she had a basket that had picnic supplies in it. And I said, Jane, whatever are you doing? And she said, I'm having a picnic today, and you're the one I'm having it for. And I said, but Jane, it's 0 outside, and it's cold. And she said, you thought I'd forget, didn't you, what today was? And you thought I wouldn't know what your heart needed. And she said, you need to laugh. It's time to laugh. So she came in, spread out the basket, and I'm still pretty serious at this point, thinking this is very strange. And she spread it out, and when she did, she spread out this wonderful red checkered tablecloth, and stenciled on it were these little black ants. I absolutely burst into laughter, and she said, what's a picnic without ants? So I said, you know, I can't believe I laughed. I shouldn't be laughing.
My father, he's always been a really funny guy ever since he was a person who could always make fun of himself. He enjoyed making other people laugh.
She said, remember what you told me about needing sunshine in your life, and if you didn't have sunshine in a day, you had to make your own? She said, we're making your sunshine today, and you're going to be okay. And I was. After that, I began to unthaw. I began to get back into life, and I really meant it. It wasn't pretend. It was real.
When he was about, I think he was 37, he was diagnosed with cancer. And it was melanoma cancer, and it was on his ear. And they told him that they wanted to do some radical surgery. They would take off his ear, they'd take all the lymph glands underneath his neck, out from under his arm. His ear was cut off. Basically, they left him enough that he could hang his glasses on it, because he wore glasses. But that's all he had, and all the rest was gone. And he always was worried about being disfigured. He'd always turn his head in pictures so that you wouldn't see that side. But after a while, it became just that was Dad. That was part of him. He used to joke about it. My mother used to say to people, he'd say, no, don't get her upset because, she'll bite your ear off. And he'd turn and say, see what happens when...
For short years down the road, I would again be tested when my only son we were told that he had a brain tumor.
Imagine, at 18 years old, me sitting in a hospital room, and in walks a doctor that says, you have a malignant brain tumor. And I said, what? You've got to be kidding me. I don't understand. And he said, why don't you understand? And I said, how can you have a brain tumor if you don't have a brain? My folks and I laughed really hard. I looked at the doctor. He wasn't laughing at all. Instead, he jerked my parents out into the waiting room and said, I don't think David understands what's going on.
And I looked at him straight in the eye and I said, oh, but he does understand. He made a choice.
He knows exactly what's going on. This is how he chooses to deal with it. You better get on board.
It's possible that you could offend somebody. But you can't worry about that. You know, there's always going to be somebody that doesn't get it. You can't wait to feel good till everybody gets it. You know, you carry a positive contagion, there are going to be people that are vaccinated.
Later on that evening, my girlfriend walks in and she wants to know what's going on. And so I said, well, I've got a malignant brain tumor, and they told me I probably wouldn't live until to see my next birthday. And she, of course, fell apart and went home. And in going home, she talked to her mother extensively, and they agreed after talking that maybe she shouldn't be around me right now because my brain tumor might be contagious. And once again, my response to that is, if she doesn't have a brain, she can't get a brain tumor.
Last day of radiation, my dad and I had this idea, and we kept this from my mom. I rent a tux. And so here I am, this 9-year-old kid, about 4'10" or so, yay tall, walking through St. Luke's Hospital in a top hat, coat, tails, cane, the whole 9 yards, saying, this is my last day of radiation.
2 days after David's surgery, the first day out of ICU, he's in his room. So I take little breaks out of the room sometimes just to get away. So I went downstairs in the cafeteria to get some coffee, and as I'm coming back up, I step on the elevator, and David's older sister, Debbie, is on the elevator. And when I turned, there's a big stretcher there, and her husband, Kevin, is laying on that stretcher. And I looked at her and I said, you know what, this isn't funny. I said, Kevin, get up off of there. And Kevin said, I can't. And he had a ruptured appendix and he was going to surgery.
You thought he was faking it?
And I thought they were doing it to make him, they were going to roll it up to the room and make him.
Kevin would come by my room and say, come on, it's time. So we would get out in the hallway. We both had IVs on poles, on rolling poles, and we would have IV races around our floor.
Now, did you encourage this, Mom?
Absolutely.
At 38 years old, I had a second brain tumor, and this time they were able to operate, so I had a 9-hour brain surgery and a year of chemo. They had chemo then, too, which they didn't have before.
The day came when I got a certified letter from the hospital saying something was amiss. Turns out I had breast cancer, and I remember calling my dad on the phone and saying, Dad, I have breast cancer. I have to have a double mastectomy. And he said, well, that's okay, because you can't do anything with them anyway. You can't even type. And I remember I was sitting there on the phone, I can't even type with them. Dad, you're right. What was I thinking? Let's get rid of them right away.
I would see other people that I would use as an example that when something bad happened, they broke down. And that didn't do them or anyone around them any good.
The time came up for my surgery. I wanted to have a goodbye booby party.
A what?
Goodbye booby party. So I gathered a bunch of my friends and we went out and we just had a blast. And I never laughed so hard in my life as everyone was saying goodbye to my boobies.
A 72-year-old woman came up to me after another show that I did. She said, David, I want to tell you what just happened. After my mastectomy, I went in to see my doctor, a female doctor, and I said, Doctor, I'm assuming since I just have one breast now, I get 50% off on this visit. Is that true? She started laughing. Of course, I laughed too. It's a funny line. And I said, ma'am, I got to ask you something. Did your doctor think that was funny? She said, I don't know, David. I didn't do it for her. I did it for me.
A study was done by a student at University of South Florida, a graduate student. She gave 2 actors a comedy, Lucille Ball, Desi Arnaz script, and then a tragedy. While acting, their blood was drawn. And that's what impressed me as a doctor. They're only acting. But what happens? Immune function goes up when you're laughing, cortisol levels, stress hormone levels go down. When you're in the tragedy, the opposite.
I learned a long time ago that the best thing in life to do was to make a choice about how you felt about it and how you reacted, so that being happy is a choice.
If I start laughing in a crowd, everybody starts laughing. They don't know why I'm laughing. So we know this from studies with cancer patients. If you get them to laugh 4 times a day, they live longer. And that doesn't mean you give them a joke to read. You just say laugh. You start laughing, you change your chemistry.
The joy of it is we don't remember cancer. We don't remember suffering. We don't remember the illness because he didn't allow it. He didn't allow anybody to think about anything except what makes us laugh. And it was a great gift.
But I will never forget how good it felt to laugh.
Tell me that again. Come on, that's great. About when he goes on a trip?
When I go out of town.
Goes out of town, he takes a piece of me. He takes a part of my prosthesis, goes with him. So I'm always with him. We laugh about that a lot.
What are you gonna do? Cry? I did that a little bit here.
Yeah, you already did
I'm
that.
done. It's over.